Here he is.
Y'all. Hey Rod,
Hey,
how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Last time we spoke, I didn't see that you had such a nice bass hanging around in the background.
Do you know what? It's not my bass. I wish it was my bass. It's actually we have a producer and a songwriter called Louis Schul who owns this studio that I'm in at the moment. He's got a
Ah,
beautiful bass behind me, a piano. There's guitars all around me, and yeah, it's a nice space. Where are you?
I'm in my studio in Brooklyn. I was gonna say I'll be right there then. Don't move at all. No, I'm in my studio. I'm here in Brooklyn, New York. It's a lovely kind of, it would be the sunset maybe, but it's a lovely evening here. This is a spot that I built and started working out of in right at the end there of 2020, and it's kind of amazing. Actually, I'm really glad to talk to you from here because it's kind of built according to the specs and as a reaction to like what was being asked of me on a bunch of different records I was working on over the past year or so. So yeah, I'm
What?
excited to show you the spot here. Let me give you a little,
Yeah. What do you mean by that? It was there we go. Look at
you
that.
know,
Wow.
and then we got a lot of windows, and then I got my ATCs.
Awesome.
You know what it is.
When you say
Yeah.
it was built to the specs of some of the things you've been asked to do over the
Yeah,
last
it was kind of like I built this place. This is my space. I built it kind of like based on based on kind of the experience I had working in fancier studio or like different places like Electric Lady and stuff like that, and kind of what we used to do there. Like in the moment where I built the studio, it was like peak 2020 pandemic times. It was like reacting to like the kind of work that I was doing at the time, which involved a lot of like remote recording and kind of like writing on Zoom, or we were all kind of doing whatever we could at that time. And so I kind of built the place to try and achieve kind of everything that I was able to achieve in like a, a proper full feature recording studio, but have it be a little bit more like, my place, like a little bit more open towards writing as opposed to being a scary studio environment. So,
right.
one of the things is like all the keyboards, everything's all plugged in and ready to record. And, that's kind of my vibe, is like having everything available, ready to go. It sounds good. Or like over time, like you're working out the channels to where you have it sounding a specific kind of way for a specific instrument. And having the studio be as flexible as that has allowed me to kind of like get really specific about the kind of sounds I'm going for when I'm recording instruments and stuff. And so
Right.
that's been really fun.
Yeah. If there was one key thing, I guess when you're building a space like that and you have the opportunity to make it exactly how you want it, was
Right.
there one thing that you'd always thought when you went to visit studios, I wish I did this, and you had the opportunity to do that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that there's probably like a 10,000 things I'd like to do. Like like your studio can be like your I don't know. I guess if like you start, if you buy a boat or something, you're like, I'll never stop. But one of the big things for me that I was interested in doing was having a space where some of the more cumbersome instruments that I like to hear on records that I like to play were set up and ready to go, so that it was more about inspiration to
Right.
play and record those instruments than the usual process of whenever you have sort of a smaller space and something like drums requires a setup and a breakdown. So one of the big things for me was the B3, actually. So I have a live room over here.
Yeah, cool.
B3 and drums. That's been a big quest, and like having a space where I could easily record that is amazing. So that's my B3 over here in the corner.
Wow.
And I've got the Leslie mic'd up in stereo, as
Nice.
you do. And just being able to like play the B3 whenever I want and record it properly has been just really a huge gateway towards it kind of making its way onto records, or like, you know, that texture is something that's really unique, and to me has like a kind of like a big studio quality to it, right? Like, because it's always like, it's a big old thing and you have to record it and play it a specific way. But I think whenever you use it as like a way to, through certain kinds of songs, like transition from section to section, it has a certain motion that only that kind of instrument can provide, you know? And that's kind of how I feel about a lot of the instruments in the space. And that's why, like, I've been so obsessed with, you know? So here's the drum set.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's an old Gretsch from the 60s that's, they call it like, yeah, my friend of mine's his dad's a drum collector, and so he really took my ear off and helped me pick out this great kit that kind of like, if you bought it from the catalog in the 60s, it would have come like that. Wow. Sounds amazing. And we have it mic'd up in a really specific way that's been a big process, you know? It's kind of an ongoing process to achieve different kind of like drum sounds of different eras, you know? It's been like a thing that I was up to over the past couple of years, is like being able to integrate and use sound references in a realistic way, but not in a like imitation way. Like it, like, you know, like, oh, I love Earth, Wind and Fire records. Like, I want to find out about like the EQs they used, and you know, it can be as dorky as like EQs and this and that, but like when you start looking into how some of these records that let's say you're obsessed with, like when you start looking into how people made them, you're like, you find out about little elements of their experimentation and some of the more adventurous stuff they did that to me is like some of the most freeing. Like specifically with Earth, Wind and Fire, I was having to do like this cover of Shining Star, and I wanted to do it, like I wanted to learn about how they did the original one, because I was like, that's a big song, like I don't want to mess it up. And so like one of the things I read about Verdine White, the bassist from Earth, Wind and Fire, was talking about how he used to like do all this bass multi-tracking and use certain kind of like chorus and phasing, and I was like, oh, that's unusual, like you wouldn't normally be drawn to. Oh, okay, like there's normally the rules about the bass is like you have the one good bass track and you put it down the middle, and like, you know. So like learning that, it kind of like is an exciting way to kind of like push the boundaries of what you understand of what I've kind of learned about like how to make certain kinds of sounds on record. And like I feel like the process is kind of both of those things, like achieve like something that you have the intention to achieve, but then also how to take that ability and like push it into the unknown or something, you know?
Right.
Do something stupid.
Yeah. Have you always been a student of the game like that?
I think so. Like whether intentionally or not, there's more, you know, like I feel like there's so often you're like, with that kind of thing, you like keep it on the low, and then you find out like, okay, it's okay to be nerdy a little bit, like as long as I don't think like everyone wants to hear about it, you know what I mean? So I kind of like, you try and know your audience. But for me, I've always been obsessed with, and this is one of the things I love about what y'all do. I used to like buy the CD or buy the LP or whatever, the record, and like sit there and listen to it and read everything. Like I remember getting like a CD, and then you open it up and they would be like, have the Spartan kind of album art, like just one sheet with like a picture. Yeah. I'd be like, damn it, you know, like, because I wanted to sit there and like find out as much as I could about what went into making that thing. Because it was like trying to understand like something that's like at some point is just magic, but like you can learn as much about the craft of it as possible, which I think is, that's something I've always been drawn to. And in collaborators and musicians too, like people who are really about the craft, I think. Yeah. It'll come up, it'll surprise you too. Like people who come off as real cool, like will be the most studious, you know?
Okay.
So
It's so relatable, that thing you just said about the CD. You know, if you didn't have many liner notes, like for me, it was always, you know, you'd buy the vinyl and you'd pull out, you'd look inside to pull out the sleeve, which would hopefully have all the lyrics and the credits, and
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
the dust jacket and the record, and you'd be like, is that it?
I know, you'd be like, I understand why you did this. You know, it was for art. They did it for art, and we've all been there. But I'm like, and I used to even be that way. It's like the kind of thing whenever when I used to write songs, like I would always be into this thing of like, you write the song, but then like, and this was maybe that was popular around the time I started writing songs, but it was like, you write the song and then you title the song like something that has nothing to do with like, it has nothing to do with what any of the lyrics in the song. It's all like, you know, like, and that was like subversive or something. And then you realize one day like, oh, maybe like the function of the song title is to help people remember like what the song was that they liked.
Right.
You know, so I feel like about liner notes, like, I understand why you did it for art, but at the same time,
Yeah,
you know, think about me. I want to know. So like nowadays I'm really into the credits of records, and I think that we're at a moment now where people want to be able to find out more about what went into their favorite music. It's just kind of like the format of it isn't there right now or yet. It's not like really happening in a way that, I don't know.
yeah.
Like, I would love to be able to have that, something that was similar to that, you know, nowadays, now that like vinyl schedules are pushed back and,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I was wondering, when you look at your career, you know, artist, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, producer, engineer, so many different facets of what you do. How do you make sure that you get credited for all those roles when you do?
As for me, I have a great manager and management team or whatever that like that are really lovely about that and have helped me understand the importance of following up and kind of like having that stuff be listed in whatever format it is, because as we said, it's kind of ad hoc right now. And I used to just, honestly, I didn't understand the importance of that. I used, you know, when I was just doing when I was on my own DIY, I was like, would just do records. And I don't know, this maybe even when I was coming up, it was like, yeah, you just do, it was kind of punk, like, or hip hop or something, like you do the record and then you're like, yeah, that's it. Like, that's the thing. I did the thing. So people are going to find out about that. But it's, in the digital world, it's kind of like a little bit different, you know, and people expect to be able to find out things along their normal digital line. So you got to kind of fit into that some way. The best solution we have for now is like y'all, All Music, you know, Discogs. It's kind of like, there's no real, like, it's not like how it used to be, like you could hit up the record, you look on the record, you know. So yeah, someone said shout out to Tenny, my manager. She's the best. But she did but big fact, she definitely was like, yo, like you just need to like make sure it's listed in the places where credits are listed. And that's been huge, because I hate talking about, you know, who likes talking about themselves, and like, so it's better to be able to like have it somewhere, you know, and like just do your thing. Cause like, yeah, it's true. Like also like there's just so many different, over the years, like different types of ways to be involved in records. And I'm just like so into the craft that I'll get in any old place. And through that, I've learned the value also of like trying to keep credit straight for my collaborators when I'm doing this, because music is very fluid and like creativity is good to be open-ended, but then there comes a point where you have to like, you know, tie everything up, and it's good not to overlook that, honestly, just because like you want the same thing to happen with stuff you work on. Like you want the people you're working with to be reachable by, like, if someone hears it, they hear the drums, they want to know if someone played it, you know, like who did that, you know.
Well, that's
to me, it deepens the mystery of the thing in a way. It doesn't take away from the mystery. I don't know.
Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do at Jaxsta. Make sure that all that information is there. You've got a busy week. You got Grammys.
Yeah, it's like the main thing is I just figured out what I'm gonna wear today. So that was like a huge That was a huge stress. Well, I got some looks. I'm gonna be turning some looks.
Give us the scoop. What's the vibe?
You have to say, stay tuned, baby. No, I was just like, I have a friend of mine who's a stylist, a legend, and she was helping me get myself together today because, you know, we've been in this pandemic. I haven't really been fashion forward. I've been like very functional with my fashion, let's say. So I was like, oh shit, it's time to show out. So we got some. It's fun. It was really fun to like kind of think about getting dressed up for something. It sounds so sad, but it's true. I'm excited. It's gonna be fun. There's gonna be I think there's gonna be a lot of people that I, you know, in a certain way, like certain records are gonna be a little class reunion-y.
Yeah.
Which I'm really looking forward to. You know, really looking forward to seeing what happens and just seeing all the performances. I've never actually attended, so you know,
Okay.
Gonna get me some nachos and see how it goes. You know.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the albums you're nominated for Album of the Year, starting with Jon Batiste with the We Are album. And
Yes.
I want to talk specifically about one of the songs on there, which you worked on, called Freedom, which you co-produced. And it's such a joyous song, that song. How would you describe the vibe in the studio when you were, how did you capture that vibe?
Jon he's a real like visionary. Like, you know, there's a lot of people I know who I'm like, they're a genius, but I'm pretty sure he is. So like he has this kind of like incredible kinetic way of lighting the room up with music. And with that song, they had kind of like, it was interesting because I got involved in it in a way where he was turning it over, and it was kind of like he was looking at the song in different light. And so there was this original writing session where he had written a bunch of stuff like kind of very quickly, and like it was amazing. And I think that kind of formed like the nexus of the album. But like we were taking certain tunes and deconstructing them and like putting them back together in different ways. And so specifically with Freedom, I remember there were a few sessions where we actually took the song that's on the record is so close to like one of the original forms. We took it apart in different ways and like tried different textures of playing on certain parts to see what was most inspiring. And one of the coolest things about, I would say, like, we were trying to go for like a certain like a low rider soul like type of vibe, like kind of a car, you know, like a little bit of one of those kind of like Gap Band, or maybe like, you know, War or something like that. Yeah, that song's incredible. So we were trying to like just kind of go for something that felt very much like that kind of like fun vibe. But then over the process, after the original like creation of it, was like we took it into different, like I remember Jon and I built this thing where it was like we took parts of the song and you could DJ through it like a bounce DJ, like New Orleans music. We have this bounce music type of thing, which is like a certain kind of like way that it's like a certain style of music. But one of the things about it is how the DJ colors the track. And so one of the things we did was take it and like put some bounce stuff on it and then like try different drums. So we took it apart a bunch of different ways and examined it. And it was fun to kind of follow Jon down that path, man, because he's just like, with each kind of like take would inject something like totally exciting from the level of the musicianship and the playing. And then it's been amazing to watch it grow into that, like the dance that they create. I mean, it's just incredible. Yeah. But
how long was that you just made? How long was that process of taking the song and breaking it down and trying different stuff?
We were working on a lot of songs at once. So it would be like, you know, it was like we would go in the studio and open up a bunch of different songs and try a bunch of different stuff and be really like creative, and then have moments where it was like kind of tying together the experiments and making decisions and stuff. But so that probably took place over the course of like a few months with Freedom. Because I remember it was like the original demo, and then we tried it a number of different ways with kind of the bounce drums, and then DJ Khalil like threw down a bunch of like really cool drum shit because we wanted to have that kind of like really authentic, like a mixture of like, it's like if you DJ an old school song at a party today, that kind of vibe where it's like, you know, we want it to be in the moment and speak to the now, but also like have that real classic thing. And Khalil brought that kind of thing in the drums, you know.
Yeah.
So like, and I remember listening, we had a demo that was like with Khalil's drums, like real loud. And I listened to that like a million times because it was just like, like, it just sounded really crazy and cool. I was remember being like, oh no, I'm going to give myself demo-itis with this absolutely like unfinished version of like where the drums are hella turned up. But it was like, you know, but yeah, so that and so many of the other songs kind of went through that process of like, you know, sometimes you got to just look around the house to get back to the front, you know, like, okay, we were there already. You know, there was like this and that. You have to understand everything that's there, and sometimes that means turning it over. And with someone like Jon, who's got such a active musical mind, it was fun to like kind of watch him go through that process, because ultimately it was for him to find the most like honest version of that. So yeah.
You mentioned that I guess that New Orleans influence, and I know that you were but definitely raised in New Orleans.
I was born in Lake Charles, Louisiana. That's the Southwest Louisiana. Yeah, but my family's from New Orleans, and and I lived there I've been there. I used to be like, I'm gonna be bi-coastal. In the U.S., I feel like people say they're gonna be bi-coastal, they mean like L.A. and New York, and I was like, I'm gonna be bi-coastal, like New Orleans and New York, you know. But now I'm a little bit more in New York just because of they got more stuff going on. There's more people, whatever. I'll end up back there, but as you were saying,
I was just gonna say, but that imprinted on your DNA, did it? The sound, what you were hearing in New Orleans.
I think in ways that like, it's like so many things that happen to you when you're a kid that you like over the course of your life you realize are very specific and individual. Like everyone has this experience. The stuff that you thought was universal was actually wildly specific in the way that you came up, and you start to realize the value of that as you can kind of gain perspective and, you know, get that reflective distance. And one of the things I'm super grateful for is like in Louisiana we have like the music and the food and conversation and dancing. It all feels like it's connected to the same activity, which is like it's something that has to do with togetherness and community, but also with family and friends and with your spirit. And so you're connecting at a really, I feel like before I could even realize the time, I was connecting music to those kind of experiences that were so necessary to my spirit, so that it is one of those things. And you know, when you go to New Orleans, there's like all kind of music that just kind of passes you by on the street. There's certain kind of rhythms that we like that you will always hear in that town. And certain times of the year, you will always hear this song and that. And so like to be able to hear that kind of music on the regular basis creates a sensation, like in me as a young person, like it created the sensation that these were necessary components of togetherness. This was necessary components of like human civilization. We really believe that. The food too. The food and the music are connected. Yeah. And so is your family. So you're like, you know, you're watching movies about, I did this for my family. You're like, well, okay, all those other things are connected to family as well. And and for me also there was a church influence, which I have to give it up to the higher power for all that, because it, as a young person and learning music in church, and I've gone through different phases with it, but I think ultimately you're given a resource to connect with other people who are curious about music, and also to connect what you're learning in music to a higher incentive, you know, which is, I think that's really effective. I think that's why you see so many people who come out of like either music town, music cities, or like come from church or this and that, you know, not to overplay it, but like, I mean, you know, a lot of people go down to New Orleans just to be in the mix of like living in a place where the music is such a part of everyday culture. That's a big, you know, that's really important. You got to live somewhere where that's happening.
Yeah.
Or
So
you're helpless.
it's natural to you. I'm gonna pursue music. I'm going because I think you learned piano from the age of 3, and
Yeah.
yeah. So it was just part of your. You knew that was where you were gonna go.
Yeah, not even professionally. It was just like one of those things that you do. And then like I actually like got around. I was like got the because I started out. I mean, basically when I first started, like I always had like jobs or when I was a kid or whatever, but then would like, you know, you play in little bands. There's a lot of like playing in trucker bars and this and that little gig. But like I kind of like met some dudes up in New York who were actually going down to New Orleans and who were they were kind of some of the first people who opened my eyes to like, yeah, you could pay your rent, like playing music, like we'll go out on the street. And then,
Yeah.
and so then I went down with them to New Orleans and like, they're actually kind of been around in New Orleans. People know about them there now too, which is really dope. But we were just like playing on the street and I saw firsthand like how they took their inclination to play New Orleans music from street level to different kind of private gigs and this and that. And I realized like, oh, this is something that you could do all the time for a living. So that was something that wasn't, you know, like it's such a cultural thing that growing up playing music was just like, it was what was happening, you know? Yeah. And I was never like, I'll be a musician for a job, you know? It was always like, hey, you'll work a job and then you're going to go to the Crawfish Festival or whatever, you know? But then I figured it out. And somebody said, look at you now. Yeah,
That's it.
Ain't that it? But like, you know, it was, I'm glad that it came from that way because like, it allowed me to develop a connection to like being in music that was soul oriented, you know. I think that's good.
Yeah. There's another album which you're Grammy nominated, which is of course Taylor Swift's Evermore, which I want to talk to you about. But just kind of continuing on this sort of tangent for a little bit about busking. I think so you moved to New York when you were 16, is that right? And started busking there?
Yeah, around like 16. I was bi-coastal. I was being bi-coastal.
So that was like, who did you move there with? Like, did you leave school and just head to New York? And
I had I didn't attend enough of my second year of high school. Like I just kept skipping class and stuff. And so when it came down to it, it was like, okay, I basically made a deal, like got my GED, and then I went to like a little bit of state school, but yeah, basically just like moved to New York to give it a rip. I was feeling mighty grown. If I meet someone now who's like 16, 17, which what, you know, like there's a lot of young artists, you know, you'll see them out in the world. I'm like, oh man, I was a kid, you know?
Yeah.
Come on. But but at that time too, that was a really interesting time because I was like, there was so much traditional New Orleans music that was a part of my past that when I moved to New York, that was around the time. Like I was thinking about this today. At that time in Louisiana, it was like the come up of Southern hip hop. So that was huge. And then also it coincided with like the beginning of like the Strokes. So I feel like I was at this really cool saddle point where it was like, I'm from this place where all the coolest American, you know, like at that point it was like No Limit into Cash Money. That was like obsessed with that stuff. And then Outkast, which wasn't from Louisiana, but we felt tied to the music from Texas, like UGK and Scarface, as well as Atlanta music. You know, it's all Southern kind of hip hop. And like, I was obsessed with that stuff. And then the Strokes came and I was like, I'm playing guitar. Like, you know, it was like that combo. So I was like, okay, I'm going to move to New York. And at the time I moved to New York, I got really, early on was really interested in like, kind of like pushing the boundary, like experimenting. So like I was into the Strokes stuff, but like really into like Sonic Youth and, you know, trying to figure out what it was that they were even up to. Like and then someone showed me My Bloody Valentine. And so those first like early years in New York were pretty punky.
Right.
And then like, you know, in hip hop, punk, similar kind of workflow. And then like, then I kind of met those guys who were headed back to New Orleans doing traditional kind of New Orleans music. Maybe I was like, I mean, it was right around, I remember it was right around Katrina time that I met them and went back down. But like, that kind of like brought me, because there's a certain free jazz musician that I became obsessed with. I loved like formless jazz and 70s spiritual jazz, like Archie Shepp and Pharoah Sanders and like all this kind of stuff. But then someone showed me Albert Ayler, who, I don't know if Albert Ayler's a known, but like his combination of the kind of formless expression with the high musicianship of like his Coltrane kind of like approach to the horn, mixed with like choruses that were straight out of New Orleans street music, it really affected me. I was like, I felt like all these years that I had been exploring formlessness and noise as a way of kind of escaping from like where I felt like you're a kid, you're escaping from something. Like I felt like you doing that. All of a sudden, Albert Ayler brought it full circle into like that formlessness and noise is a component of the street music. And when those two things tied together, everything clicked, and I was able to, I feel like a lot of people have those kind of moments with them, you know, a lot of musicians have those kind of moments with like what they know versus what they feel like they love. And then those things come together and you realize like, you know, you make all these linkages, but
yeah. It's a real journey.
It's Albert Ayler though. Albert Ayler took me back. He took me back to pop music, which is sick.
There's so much more I could delve into there, but look, let's start talking about Evermore.
Sure.
The album, Taylor Swift's album, for which you are again Grammy nominated, which is super exciting. And I think the Gold Rush is the song that you performed on, and
yes,
five instruments on. So Celeste, nylon string, Rhodes, and synth. What do you recall of that session?
I was out there. Those Taylor albums they made during 2020 at like what for everyone was just like, or one of them, you know, he was you don't need to hear me say it. It was a crazy time. And so being able to contribute musically to that, because it was Folklore and Evermore were kind of like, they're connected, they were continuous. To be able to participate in something that felt so of the moment and so like, I don't know, something just immediately felt extremely special about that music to me. And I was like, at that moment, recording things, I didn't even have my studio, like, this is nice. Like this, a lot of, from the process of working on those records, I brought a lot of that stuff because it was a remote process. So I brought a lot of what I kind of, approaches that I developed from that into building this space. But at the time I was like, someone had like COVID over at my other studio. And so I was afraid to go there. I brought all the keyboards and stuff into my apartment and was like working from there and like having phone calls. And I just listening to that track of that song, I was like, oh my God. Like, we joke around because there's certain stuff where it's like, so-and-so, you would want to do a guitar track for this. And like, I want to do it quickly and move through it. And so I'll be like, okay, we'll do it this way. I'll do it direct. That's all I need. But then when it's like with Taylor stuff, I'm like, I want to play guitar in an iconic way. And I want to capture an iconic sound. And so that's like, I would joke with my brother's my engineer, we would joke with him about it a lot and be like, I think I want to get an iconic guitar tone. And so like doing stuff like choosing to record an amp or the mic you use on the amp being like what you would normally use as a vocal mic or something like that, to like really try and get instrument tones that were of a class that exists up there with the kind of music that it's fucking Taylor Swift, what she's making. I was like, this is like, I have to like A-game the sounds and the choices and stuff as best I can. And so one of the things that I was really trying to do I'm trying to do a lot of times when I'm playing on records is like create a whole take in the kind of timeless fashion of like how people made records, like when it was recorded beautifully to tape, and it was like a whole take of the song where even if you're playing the same part in repetition, you need it to be there. Like on Prince records, it's playing the ding, 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 over and over again, but it needs to be there because that feel is what propels, it's what gives the song a reason to be that long, as opposed to like, it sounds like a copy pasted loop.
Yeah.
Not that anything's wrong with copy pasted loops. Like, in fact, most of the time I'm taking the take and putting it into a really formatted way, because you want things with music a lot of times, given that option, it's something you can play with to draw attention or focus to what you're trying to draw attention or focus to. But yeah, like with Gold Rush, the track for that song, it was just so inspiring and beautiful that I wanted to try and create this kind of atmosphere of instruments that felt to me like very like timeless, but also very like the word that I use is dumb, and it's kind of a joke, but I always say like I want it to feel like luxurious. It's like not the right word, but what I'm trying to go for is like I want it to sound like it was recorded in the greatest studio in the world by Glenn Johns himself, or Bruce Swedien, or, you know, like, and so like that's kind of like the aim with that stuff. So like trying to get the recording techniques like really on point and get a whole take of something that feels like, and sometimes I'll do something like mute, because I'm doing things part by part. I'll like mute everything other than like just a selection of the instruments that I'm putting down, because I like to imagine like something that happens when I'm like when you work on music is like you add a bunch of stuff and you start making decisions and you're writing a song and it gets full, and then you're like, okay, we're going to arrange it out. You pull everything back, and you find more magic in minimal, in like seeing which little small combinations of elements work. And so I always, with doing things kind of remotely, I was thinking like, I want any part of any of these takes to be like, you could mute the whole arrangement down to just like this and the voice, and it would be cool. And so that was kind of the mindset that I was with that particular tune. And so that's, I was like, just trying to pay attention to different combinations of instruments and how the parts interlocked to create something that felt to me like a really holistic tapestry of sounds that could all sit together as like this kind of like mini chamber orchestra, but then also could be like muted down to just one element in it. Because, you know, like you don't want it to be like, oh, you mute it down to the guitar and then all of a sudden the guitar's like all shitty. You're like, oh, it's not up to the level, you know? So that's kind of what I would say about my approach to that.
Amazing.
And it's just so fucking cool. Like, I love Taylor songs like all across the board, but I really, really love Gold Rush. And it's like so cool to be involved in that song, because it's like, it's one of my favorites of her huge catalog of like amazing, like she's such an incredible artist. It's like so exciting to me and surreal to be involved at all.
Yeah. So that studio you're in now, is that what you were saying, that you did those parts remotely and you recorded them in your studio there?
Well, not for Gold Rush, because we were still doing things remotely. Like that was from my apartment, man.
Really?
Yeah, I just went for it. But like, I just like brought each instrument and like set it up and mic'd it up good and got it sounding good. It took a lot, you know, it was a little bit less streamlined. But for things like, she's been releasing amazing stuff. So on the re-recorded stuff that I've worked on for Red and Fearless, that stuff I did here. And it was really, but it was kind of bringing something from that experience of like, okay, well, I want to be able to hear something like this and immediately think, I can hear a bass being played this way, pedal steel, like, you know, try and hear the parts how I would hear on a classic record, you know, and like, or the record, something that I would love, like it just kind of appears. So to be able to capture that stuff quickly from the moment of inspiration with a high level of like sound quality, or like the sound quality that I'm aiming for, like character to the sound, that's kind of what I took to building this space. And so those processes, you know, like certain stuff like there's a certain 10-minute song. 10-minute takes they take 10 minutes as opposed to 3. So if you play, you know, 5 instruments, it takes 50 instead of 15.
Right.
Which is, you know, and that's if you just nailed it up from top to bottom each time.
Yeah.
So that for instance was a great example of when being able to kind of like move through sound ideas quickly was really good. And then another thing that's really cool is like I've worked with Jack Antonoff, the, you know, producer, songwriter, artist, amazing friend, whatever. I've worked with him for so long. I feel like there's a certain like understanding about, there's a certain shorthand like that you develop with musicians who you have a kinship or just a shared spirit with, where it's like, as you make more things together, even less, you could say even less, you know?
Right.
Like, so like one of the things that's really fun about working with him, it's really creative, you know? And then like I can try, like I also know like it creates a sense to me that I'm like, I want this shit to be even more timeless than the last one, like, you know. And I'm also not stressed about the heaviness of what we're doing, because it's like something I'm doing with my friend. And you know, it's really fun to kind of be in those relationships creatively, collaboratively with people, where you start to anticipate what each other are looking for or want the same things, and you kind of know how to achieve them, you know, like, or you kind of know what they're looking for, so you could give that, you know. That is really priceless to me. And so another sort of tangential but really special thing about that process is like,
nice one.
And working with Jack in general, he's like super fun, like trusting, you know?
Mikey, you've been so generous with your time, so we'll almost wrap this up. I just wanted to ask you
It's been so fun.
Man, we're so honored that you've joined us, so thank you. Just working, you mentioned Jack, and I know that you play on the road with Bleachers, and you also play with Blood Orange, and you've done work with the Cranberries and Albert Hammond Jr. and your own projects as well. Which is there where do you feel more comfortable, studio or stage?
I think it's all part of a balanced breakfast for me, because you need to stay in touch with different parts of your creativity, like musically, for me. So like, you know, too much time spent in the studio, you could stop living like life, and life informs your art. So then you'll hit a dead end of inspiration. Obviously the road can be tiresome for, there's enough written about that. But I think that if you do both, you keep a good sense of, because studio is about like perfection and refinement, and performance is about shared experience. So it's not about being perfect. It's about creating it's about communion. And so I think that keeping a handle on like what it is about that's working about shows, and how to do a good show, and that game time mentality of performance is super important. And I want to bring everything there into the studio, like in terms of playing, and because that kind of, those kind of, I'm really grateful for having had so much live experience, and with such a cool variety of artists, like literally like some of my favorite artists I've had the chance to like play with, which is totally nuts and still is. And I feel like the best I can do in those circumstances is like bring the A game to the show and then like see what works and learn from them in the live setting to kind of like bring into my studio practice. And so yeah, I don't know if that's I know a lot of people are like, I prefer the studio, this and that, but I think it's like important to stay in touch with how people react to your music. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Mikey, thanks so much, man. It's been so great to talk to you. You've got, you're very busy, I know that, and you've got the hugely exciting weekend coming up. So that's so awesome. Best of luck. Hope you come home with some statues.
Yeah, well, yeah. Look,